Tonight, we unravel a story that feels ripped from a blockbuster movie, yet it's a stunning tale of real life vindication. It's a story about a woman who erased her husband's public betrayal and a spectacular comeback that no one saw coming. We follow the calculated parade of a new love designed to humiliate the woman left behind. But at the city's most glamorous charity gala, under the glare of 100 cameras, the script is flipped in the most dramatic way imaginable. The ghost of a past marriage returns, not as a victim, but as royalty, ready to claim a future her ex-husband never thought she deserved. Stay with us as we reveal how one breathtaking entrance changed everything. The final meeting took place in a sterile conference room on the 47th floor of a glass tower overlooking Central Park. The view should have been magnificent, a sprawling tapestry of green and grey, but for Serafina Reyes, it was just a blur. The only thing in focus was the reflection in the polished mahogany table. A woman she barely recognized, hollowed out and pale, her sensible grey suit hanging off a frame that had shed 15 pounds from stress alone. Across from her, Alistair Vance, her husband of 10 years, looked impeccable. His silver and black Brioni suit was perfectly tailored, his Swiss watch gleamed under the recessed lighting, and his smile, that devastatingly charming smile that had once been her entire world, was now a weapon directed at her. Beside him, his lawyer, a shark in a pinstripe suit, shuffled papers with an air of bored finality. "It's a very generous offer," Serafina Alistair said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. It was the same voice that had whispered promises of forever in her ear, the same voice that had credited her for being his rock at company dinners. "The apartment, a respectable settlement. Enough for you to start over comfortably. Find a nice quiet life." A quiet life. That's what he was relegating her to. She had been the co-architect of his empire, Vance Capital. For a decade, she had been the one behind the scenes. While he was the face charming investors and closing deals, she was the engine. She'd managed the books in the early days, drafted the business plans, networked with the quiet, unassuming people who held the real power, and sacrificed her own career in architectural design to ensure his meteoric rise. She had been his partner in every sense of the word, until she was no longer convenient. The reason for her inconvenience was now a constant, glittering presence on every gossip blog and social media feed. Cassandra Sterling. A model, an influencer, 20 years his junior, with impossibly long legs and a vacant photogenic pout. Alistair had paraded her around the city like a new trophy, taking her to the same restaurants he had taken Serafina, even being photographed with her at the groundbreaking of a children's hospital wing that Serafina had personally championed and fundraised for. The humiliation was a public spectacle, and it was entirely by design. "I believe the terms are clear," Serafina's own lawyer. A kind but overwhelmed man named Robert interjected softly. "We'd like a moment to discuss." Alistair waved a dismissive hand. "There's nothing to discuss. This is it. Sign the papers, Serafina. Let's not drag this out and make it uglier than it already is." Uglier. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He had made it ugly. He had been the one to come home one Tuesday evening smelling of a cloying, expensive perfume that wasn't hers, and announced that he was unfulfilled. He had said they had grown apart, that he needed passion and vibrancy in his life. He had used a string of meaningless corporate speak cliches to dismantle a decade of shared life of love and sacrifice. He never once mentioned Cassandra's name. He didn't have to. The paparazzi had already done that for him. Serafina looked at the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, and saw a complete stranger. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, transactional hardness. He wasn't just leaving her, he was erasing her. He was rewriting their history to cast her as a footnote, a starter wife who had served her purpose. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. Her lawyer gave her a pleading look, but she knew it was no use. Fighting Alistair would be a long, bloody war in the press, and she had no fight left in her. He had all the power, all the connections, all the money. She was just the quiet, unassuming woman he had left behind. She signed her name, the ink, a stark black scar on the crisp white paper. Serafina Reyes. She had insisted on taking back her maiden name, the only piece of her identity she felt she had left. Alistair's smile widened. He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. Excellent. Well, that's that. I wish you all the best, Serafina. Truly. He didn't look at her as he walked out of the room. He was already moving on his mind on his next board meeting, his next gala, his next photograph with his new, vibrant love. He left Serafina sitting in the silent, soulless room, the echo of their shattered vows ringing in her ears. As the door clicked shut, a single tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated rage. He thought he had won. He thought he had reduced her to a settlement and a quiet life. He thought he had erased her. Sitting there, staring at her own ghost-like reflection, Serafina Reyes made a different vow. It was not a vow of love, but of rebirth. He wanted her to disappear into a quiet life. Fine. But she would not be disappearing. She would be gestating. She would rebuild herself, not from the ashes of their marriage, but from the steel he had unknowingly forged within her. And when she re-emerged, she would not be the quiet, sensible woman he had discarded. She would be someone he could never in his wildest dreams ignore. The world would see her not as Alistair Vance's ex-wife, but as the architect of her own, far grander empire. The 6 months following the divorce were a blur of calculated silence and relentless work. Serafina disappeared from the New York social scene so completely it was as if she had been a figment of everyone's imagination. Her friends' concerned calls eventually dwindled, her invitations went unanswered. The gossip columns that had feasted on her pain moved on to the next scandal. To the world, and especially to Alistair Serafina Reyes, had faded into the obscurity he had destined for her. But in a discreet, sun-drenched loft in the meatpacking district, a renaissance was underway. The settlement, which Alistair had considered a generous pittance to keep her quiet, became her seed capital. She didn't spend it on therapy shopping or vengeful luxuries. She invested every penny into the dream she had deferred for a decade, her own firm. She didn't return to traditional architecture. The world had changed, and so had she. She founded Aura Designs, a bespoke firm at the intersection of innovative technology, sustainable architecture, and immersive interior design. It was a concept so forward-thinking that it bordered on science fiction. She worked on creating smart homes that learned their inhabitants' habits, corporate spaces that boosted productivity through biophilic design and virtual reality, blueprints that allowed clients to walk through a building before a single spade of dirt was turned. Her days were grueling 18-hour marathons fueled by black coffee and an iron will. She assembled a small, brilliant team of young, hungry visionaries who didn't care about her past, only the future she was selling them. She was no longer the soft-spoken woman who moderated her opinions in boardrooms. At the head of her own conference table, her voice was clear, her vision was uncompromising, and her intelligence, once a background support system for Alistair, was now a dazzling, formidable force. The transformation was not just professional. She hired a personal trainer, a former Marine, who worked her until her body, once softened by a comfortable life, became lean and strong. The discipline of the gym was a balm to her fractured spirit. Each pound she lifted felt like she was reclaiming a piece of her own strength. She traded her sensible suits for a wardrobe of sharp architectural pieces in deep jewel tones and powerful monochromes custom-made by a young, unknown designer she'd discovered. Her long, mousy hair was cut into a chic, severe bob that framed a face that was now angular and defined. The hollowness in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, focused fire. One rainy afternoon, a pivotal meeting occurred. Through a discreet introduction from her lawyer, she found herself in the private office of Jonathan Sterling. The name was legendary in the city. Sterling was an old money titan, a real estate magnate with a reputation for being as ruthless in business as he was fiercely private. He was also in a twist of cruel irony that was not lost on Serafina Cassandra Sterling's father. She had hesitated to take the meeting, fearing it was some kind of trap or a further humiliation, but her lawyer had insisted. "He knows who you are," Robert had said, "and he's not a fan of Vance." Jonathan Sterling was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've reviewed your business plan for Aura Designs," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's either a work of utter genius or complete folly. I haven't decided which." Serafina met his gaze without flinching. For the next hour, she didn't speak of her divorce or Alistair. She spoke of her vision. She laid out her plans for integrated bioresponsive lighting, for urban vertical farms integrated into residential towers, for materials that could sequester carbon from the atmosphere. She spoke with a passion and precision that left no room for doubt. Sterling listened, his steepled fingers covering his mouth, his piercing eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "You were the brains behind Vance Capital, weren't you?" he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "The early strategy, the portfolio diversification, that had your fingerprints all over it. Vance doesn't have that kind of foresight. He's a salesman, a peacock." Serafina simply nodded. "My daughter," he said the words, tasting like ash in his mouth, "is a fool. She is drawn to shiny, hollow things. And Alistair Vance is the shiniest, hollowest man I have ever had the displeasure of meeting." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "He thinks marrying a Sterling gives him a direct line to my legacy. He has been trying for months to get me to invest in his new global expansion fund. He thinks he is playing in the big leagues now. He is mistaken." He opened a drawer and pulled out a single file, pushing it across the desk toward her. "This is a preliminary brief for the Hudson Yards Zenith project, a new multi-use skyscraper, the most ambitious architectural project in this city for the next 50 years. My firm is heading the development. Every major architectural firm in the world is bidding for it." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I am giving you a chance to be one of them. I am also creating a private innovation fund. Its first investment will be a controlling stake in Aura Designs. Not because I feel sorry for you, Ms. Reyes. Pity is a useless emotion. I am doing it because I believe in genius, and I believe in backing a winner. And more than anything, I enjoy watching peacocks get plucked." Serafina stared at the file, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just funding, it was a coronation. It was a seat at the most exclusive table in the city. Jonathan Sterling was not just giving her a sword, he was giving her an army. "There is one condition," he added, his eyes locking with hers. "For the next few months, we operate in total secrecy. No one knows of my investment. No one knows we have ever met. You will continue to build your portfolio with smaller projects. Then at the right moment, we will make our announcement. The stage must be perfect." A slow smile spread across Serafina's face, the first genuine, joyful smile in over a year. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I believe I know the perfect stage. Life for Alistair Vance was a meticulously curated performance of success. His penthouse apartment, a monument of white marble and minimalist furniture, offered panoramic views of the city he believed he had conquered. His days were a whirlwind of high-powered lunches, fawning news interviews and board meetings where his booming voice and confident assertions masked a growing, gnawing anxiety. His new life with Cassandra was exactly as he had envisioned it, beautiful, glamorous, and relentlessly public. Their relationship was a brand managed through carefully staged paparazzi shots and saccharine Instagram posts. Cassandra, for her part, played the role of the adoring fiancée to perfection. She was a stunning accessory on his arm, her presence validating his virility and power. She was the vibrancy he had craved. But behind the gilded doors of the penthouse, the vibrancy was often shrill. Cassandra was demanding, her mood shifting, with the tides of social media engagement. Her conversations revolved around follower counts, brand sponsorships, and the perceived slights of rival influencers. She had no interest in the nuances of his business, only in the lifestyle it provided. She saw Vance Capital not as an entity he had built, but as a personal bottomless bank account. Darling, I absolutely need the new season Birkin in Crocodile, she'd announced one morning, scrolling through her phone while a personal chef prepared their organic kale smoothies. It's the color of the season. It's an investment. Cassie, we need to be a little more prudent right now, Alistair had replied, loosening his tie. Cash flow is a bit tight with the new fund launching. Her head snapped up, her perfectly sculpted brows furrowing in displeasure. Tight. What does that even mean? You're Alistair Vance. You don't do tight. Don't be boring, darling. Just buy it. He had bought it, of course. He couldn't afford to look weak, especially not to her. But the truth was, things were becoming strained. Launching the Global Expansion Fund was proving more difficult than he'd anticipated. He'd counted on his engagement to Cassandra to open the door to her father's legendary fortune. He had envisioned Jonathan Sterling eagerly pouring hundreds of millions into his fund, a symbolic passing of the torch. Instead, he had been met with a wall of impenetrable politeness. His calls to Jonathan's office were always taken by a secretary. His requests for a meeting always deferred. Jonathan was perpetually overseas or in back-to-back meetings. Alistair had tried to use Cassandra as a channel, but she was useless. Daddy is just Daddy, she'd say with a shrug. He's always busy. Just send him another gift basket. He likes single malt. Alistair was beginning to suspect that the old man actively disliked him. The thought was infuriating. He was at the top of his game. He was on the cover of Forbes next month. Why couldn't the old dinosaur see that this was a perfect union of legacy and modern dynamism? His frustration with Sterling only amplified his lingering irritation about his divorce. The settlement with Serafina, which he'd thought a masterpiece of swift, ruthless efficiency, now felt like a loose end. He hadn't heard a peep about her. He assumed she had crawled away to some suburban town as he'd intended. But occasionally, a stray thought would intrude, a memory of her sharp insight on a difficult merger or her calming presence during a market downturn. He'd quickly squash these thoughts. She was part of his past, a past he was actively erasing. The upcoming Starlight Foundation Gala was to be the apex of his new life. He had bought an entire table front and center for a staggering sum. He would be there with Cassandra on his arm, the undisputed king of New York finance. It was the ultimate stage to project the power and stability he desperately needed his investors to see. He had even heard a rumor that Jonathan Sterling would be making a rare public appearance to announce a major city project. This was his chance, Alistair thought. He would corner the old man, charm him, and finally secure the investment that would solidify his empire. "What are you wearing to the gala, darling?" he asked Cassandra one evening as she posed for a selfie, angling her phone to catch the light from the sunset. Obviously the custom Valdrin Sahiti gown. "The one that's practically dripping in crystals," she said, not looking away from her screen. "They're doing a whole feature on my look for Vogue Online. The headline is 'The New Queen of New York Society.'" "Perfect," Alistair said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "We'll be the talk of the town." He looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. He felt a surge of triumph. Everything was falling into place. He had the beautiful fiancée, the high-profile career, the respect of his peers. He had shed his old, boring life and emerged as a titan. He was untouchable. He never once thought about Serafina. She was a ghost, a forgotten chapter in a book he had long since closed. He couldn't imagine a world where her quiet, sensible existence could ever intersect with his dazzling high-stakes reality again. The thought was so absurd, it wasn't even a possibility. The gala would be his coronation. There was simply no other possible outcome. The grand ballroom of the plaza was a breathtaking sea of opulence and power. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, cast a diamond-like shimmer over the city's elite. The air hummed with the murmur of discreet gossip, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the ambient strains of a live string quartet. This was the Starlight Foundation Gala, the absolute pinnacle of New York's social calendar, where fortunes were pledged and reputations were cemented. Alistair Vance and Cassandra Sterling made their entrance precisely at the peak of the arrivals, a movie calculated for maximum impact. A tidal wave of camera flashes erupted from the press line, the staccato clicking creating a sound like a hailstorm. Alistair, cloaked in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, radiated smug confidence. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of Cassandra's back, guiding her through the gauntlet of photographers. Cassandra was a vision in her crystal-encrusted gown. The dress was a spectacle of silver and light, so heavily beaded it seemed to be woven from starlight itself. It was daring, with a plunging neckline and a thigh-high slit designed to command attention and scream wealth. She posed and preened, offering the cameras, her practiced smile, her every movement a performance for her legion of online followers. Alistair, Cassandra. Over here, the photographers yelled. The new power couple. They were the center of the universe, and they reveled in it. Inside the ballroom, they were immediately swarmed by sycophants and business associates. Alistair accepted congratulations on his upcoming Forbes cover, while Cassandra air-kissed her way through a circle of fellow socialites, comparing the carat size of their various gems. "Isn't she just breathtaking?" Alistair boomed to a rival hedge fund manager, gesturing toward Cassandra. "The most beautiful woman in the room." "Absolutely, Alistair. You've certainly upgraded," the man replied with a knowing smirk. The jab at his past was not lost on Alistair. It was exactly the narrative he wanted. He had shed the old, the dowdy, the unremarkable for the new, the brilliant, the envied. He felt invincible. They took their seats at their prime table, a triumphant island in the center of the room. The evening was unfolding exactly as he had planned. He scanned the room for Jonathan Sterling, but didn't see him yet. No matter, the night was young. About 30 minutes later, as the first course was being served, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of the room. It started near the grand entrance, a sudden hush that spread like a ripple in a pond. The frenetic energy of the photographers outside, which had died down to a low buzz, suddenly flared with an intensity that surpassed even Alistair and Cassandra's arrival. The flashes were so rapid and sustained that they pulsed through the ballroom doors like a lightning storm. A few heads turned, then a few more. A murmur went through the crowd. "Who is that?" someone whispered at a nearby table. Alistair craned his neck, annoyed by the distraction. Cassandra was busy taking a video of her champagne glass for her Instagram story. "Probably some politician," he muttered. And then she walked in. The woman who entered the ballroom did not seem to merely walk. She seemed to flow. She moved with a serene, deliberate grace that instantly commanded the attention of every person in the room. The string quartet seemed to falter for a beat. Conversations died mid-sentence. She was wearing a gown of deep sapphire velvet, a color so rich and profound it seemed to absorb the light around it. The dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance and architectural design. It was not revealing yet. It clung to a silhouette that was toned powerful and unapologetically feminine. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and a dramatic floor-sweeping cape that billowed softly behind her. Around her neck was a single breathtaking piece of jewelry, a necklace of cascading white diamonds that looked like frozen starlight against the dark velvet. Her hair was a sleek, raven-black bob that gleamed under the chandeliers. Her face, which so many in the room vaguely recalled as being pleasant but forgettable, was now a study in sculpted elegance. Her cheekbones were sharp, her jawline defined, and her lips were painted a bold, confident crimson. But it was her eyes that held everyone captive. They were dark, intelligent, and held a calm, unshakable confidence. There was no trace of the broken, pale woman from the lawyer's office. This was not a ghost. This was a queen. It was Serafina Reyes. For a full 10 seconds, the room was suspended in a state of collective shock. People who had known her for years stared their minds, struggling to reconcile the woman they were seeing with the one they remembered. At his table, Alistair Vance froze his fork halfway to his mouth. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly pale. The smug smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated disbelief. It was as if he had seen a spectre, but a spectre more vibrant and alive than anyone else in the room. Cassandra finally looked up from her phone, annoyed by the sudden silence. "What is Her voice trailed off as she followed Alistair's gaze. She saw Serafina, her perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of confusion, which quickly curdled into jealous rage. Her own glittering look-at-me dress suddenly felt cheap and gaudy next to the profound, regal elegance of Serafina's gown. The cameras outside were exploding, but the real explosion was the silent seismic shockwave that tore through the ballroom. Alistair Vance had paraded his new love expecting to be crowned king. He never anticipated that the queen he had banished would choose this very night to return and reclaim her kingdom. And as Serafina took her first step into the room, her gaze coolly sweeping over the stunned crowd, it was clear she wasn't just here to attend a gala. She was here to make a statement, and the entire city was her audience. Serafina did not pause at the door to drink in the reaction she had caused. That would have been the action of someone seeking approval. Instead, she moved with the quiet assurance of someone who owned the room before she even entered it. Her destination was a discreet yet strategically important table near the dais, where several of the city's most influential and older power brokers were seated. They were not the flashy hedge fund managers Alistair courted, but the quiet titans of industry and real estate who could build or break a man with a single phone call. As she passed tables, the whispers followed her like the train of her gown. "Is that Serafina? What happened to her? She looks incredible. My God, that necklace must be worth a fortune." Alistair watched paralyzed as she navigated the room. He felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on him, sensing their pity, their curiosity, their schadenfreude. This was not how the night was supposed to go. She was supposed to be a sad story, a forgotten memory. Instead, she had become the main event. "Who does she think she is?" Cassandra hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. Her fingers were clenched so tightly around her jeweled clutch that her knuckles were white. "Look at her. It's pathetic. She's trying to get your attention, Alistair. It's just so desperate." But even as she said the words, Cassandra knew they were false. There was nothing desperate about Serafina. She hadn't even glanced in their direction. It was a dismissal more profound than any confrontation. It was the dismissal of a queen to a court jester. Serafina reached her table and was greeted with a warmth and respect that stunned the onlookers. A distinguished, silver-haired man stood to pull out her chair. Another, the head of a massive construction conglomerate, leaned in to kiss her cheek. These were men Alistair had been trying to get meetings with for years, and they were treating Serafina not as a socialite, but as a peer. The final devastating blow to Alistair's carefully constructed reality came in the form of a man who had just entered the ballroom through a private side entrance, deliberately avoiding the press. Jonathan Sterling, looking imposing and powerful in a classic tuxedo, strode directly to Serafina's table. Cassandra saw him first. "Daddy," she exclaimed, a triumphant look flashing across her face. She stood up, expecting him to come to their table to finally give Alistair the public acknowledgement he craved. But Jonathan Sterling did not look at his daughter. His gaze was fixed on Serafina. He reached her table, bent down, and kissed her warmly on both cheeks. "Serafina, my dear, you look magnificent," his deep voice boomed, carrying across the now silent nearby tables. "I trust your journey was pleasant. Perfectly pleasant, Jonathan." "Thank you." Serafina replied, her voice calm and clear. The sight was so shocking, so utterly incomprehensible, that a collective gut went through their section of the ballroom. Jonathan Sterling, the reclusive patriarch, the man everyone was here to see, was fawning over Alistair Vance's cast-off ex-wife. Cassandra stood frozen, her hand half raised in a wave, her face a picture of pure humiliation. Her own father was ignoring her in favor of the woman she had replaced. Alistair felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. He felt the narrative of the night of his life slipping violently from his grasp. He had to regain control. Pushing back his chair, he stood up and began to walk towards Serafina's table, his stride a forced imitation of his usual confidence. He reached the table just as Jonathan Sterling was taking his seat beside Serafina. Jonathan, Alistair said, his voice a little too loud. "Good to see you. I was hoping we'd have a chance to connect tonight." He then turned his attention to Serafina, forcing a condescendingly gentle smile. "Serafina, what a surprise. You look well. It's good to see you getting out." His tone was meant to be patronizing, to re-establish the old dynamic, to remind everyone that she was the little woman he had set aside. Serafina looked up at him. There was no pain in her eyes, no anger, not even recognition of their shared past. There was only a cool, polite indifference. It was the look one might give to a slightly incompetent waiter. Before she could speak, Jonathan Sterling answered for her. He looked up at Alistair, his stormy eyes filled with a chillingly placid contempt. "Vance," he said, the name sounding like an insult. "I don't believe we have anything to discuss." He then gestured toward Serafina. "But you should know who you're speaking to. This is Serafina Reyes, the president and CEO of Aura Designs." He paused, letting the title sink in. "She is also my new primary partner and the lead architect for the Hudson Yards Zenith project, which I am announcing tonight." The words hit the air with the force of a physical blow. Aura Designs, Zenith project. Lead architect Alistair stared, his mind reeling. It was impossible. She was an architect, yes, but she had given that up. She was nobody. "I'm sorry," Alistair stammered, a frantic, disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. "There must be some mistake. Serafina runs a small boutique firm." Jonathan Sterling's smile was arctic. "There is no mistake. My fund has acquired a 60% stake in her boutique firm. We are investing 9 figures into its expansion. Serafina's vision is the future of urban development. She is a genius. And unlike some people," he added, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Alistair, "she possesses integrity, loyalty, and true substance." The public humiliation was absolute. Jonathan Sterling hadn't just endorsed Serafina, he had anointed her, and in the same breath, he had utterly devastatingly annihilated Alistair in front of the very people he had spent his entire career trying to impress. Alistair stood there speechless as Serafina finally met his gaze and gave him a small, pitying smile. It was the smile of a victor who had won the war before the first battle had even begun. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-motion car crash for Alistair Vance. The news of Jonathan Sterling's announcement spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Whispers turned into excited murmurs. Financial reporters, sensing a major story, began furiously typing on their phones, their focus shifting entirely from the gala's charity aspect to the bombshell business revelation. The Zenith project was the biggest development deal in a generation, and it had been handed to a relative unknown, a woman who until an hour ago was famous only for being Alistair Vance's jilted ex-wife. Suddenly, Serafina's table was the center of power in the room. A procession of the city's most influential figures made their way over to offer their congratulations. They spoke to her with a deference and respect that Alistair had always believed was reserved for men like himself. He watched, rooted to the spot in the aisle, as she accepted their praise with the same serene grace with which she had entered. She was not gloating. She was simply inhabiting a role that was rightfully hers. Humiliation gave way to a desperate, clawing panic in Alistair's chest. He stumbled back to his table, where Cassandra was in the middle of a hushed, furious phone call. "What do you mean his card was declined?" she hissed into her phone. "Try it again." "It's a black card. It doesn't have a limit." She slammed the phone down, her face pale with fury and embarrassment. Her personal shopper, on a mission to secure a rare couture bag being sold at the gala's auction, had just been publicly rebuffed. "Alistair, what is going on?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Why is your card being declined? And why is my father treating that's nobody like she's the Queen of England?" Alistair sank into his chair, his mind racing. It didn't make sense. Cash flow was tight, but his credit was impeccable. Unless his phone buzzed. It was a text from his CFO. "Need to talk. Urgent. We have a major problem." Another buzz. An alert from a financial news service. The headline made his blood run cold. "Jonathan Sterling divests from Vance Capital. Citees lack of confidence in leadership." A third buzz. An email from the board of directors of his largest corporate client. "Subject emergency review of our account." The dominoes were not just falling, they were being bulldozed. Jonathan Sterling had not just backed Serafina. He had systematically and secretly dismantled the foundations of Alistair's own empire. His investment in Serafina was the flourish, but the real work had been done in the shadows. Sterling had been poisoning the well for months, quietly pulling his own money and influencing his network to do the same. Alistair's Global Expansion Fund, the venture he had staked his entire reputation on, was built on a house of cards, and Sterling had just pulled out the bottom one. He looked across the room at Jonathan Sterling, who caught his eye and gave him a slow, deliberate nod, a final acknowledgement of his complete and utter ruin. The old man had played him from the very beginning. His rejection of Alistair wasn't just personal disdain, it was a calculated, long-term strategy of destruction. And the catalyst, the reason for it all, was now sitting beside him, looking radiant. The facade of Alistair and Cassandra's perfect life crumbled in an instant. The power they projected was based entirely on Alistair's perceived success. With that gone, there was nothing left. "My father," Cassandra whispered, the horrifying realization dawning on her. He did this to ruin you, and he used her to do it." Her fury at Serafina was now dwarfed by her terror of her father's wrath and the sudden, shocking loss of her lifestyle. The glamorous life she had signed up for was evaporating before her eyes. She looked at Alistair, but she no longer saw a titan of industry. She saw a failure, a man who had been outmaneuvered and publicly castrated, a sinking ship. Without another word, Cassandra Sterling stood up. She smoothed down her crystal-covered dress, lifted her chin, and walked away from the table. She didn't look back at Alistair. She walked straight out of the ballroom, her exit as dramatic as her entrance, leaving him alone, amidst the wreckage of his life at a table paid for. With money he no longer had, Alistair sat there, a hollow man in a perfect tuxedo. The murmur of the crowd, the clinking of glasses, the music, it all faded into a dull roar in his ears. He was no longer the king of the gala. He was a cautionary tale, a public spectacle of hubris and downfall. He finally looked at Serafina again. She was in conversation with a famous architect, her face animated, her eyes sparkling with intelligence and passion. She looked vibrant, she looked fulfilled, she was everything he had told her. He needed everything he had claimed she was not, and he had thrown it all away for something as fleeting and superficial as a glittering dress and a pretty face. In that moment, he understood the devastating truth. Serafina hadn't returned for revenge. Revenge was beneath her. She had simply moved on and built a better world for herself, a world so far beyond his own that he could no longer even reach it. Her success was not the weapon that destroyed him. His own character, His own arrogance and cruelty had been the cause of his downfall. Her triumph was merely the light that illuminated his ruin. The morning sun broke over Manhattan, glinting off a million windows, but the real light, the one generating all the heat, was emanating from the city's screens. By 6 a.m., the story of the Starlight Foundation Gala was no longer a piece of society gossip. It was a financial and cultural earthquake. Serafina Reyes was on the landing page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Bloomberg. Cable news channels had scrapped their planned segments to run specials on the dramatic corporate coup, with breathless pundits analyzing every angle. The headlines were a barrage of sensational, triumphant prose. The Phoenix of Park Avenue. How Serafina Reyes built a new empire from the ashes of betrayal. Vance Capital crumbles as ex-wife. Pause with Sterling's backing, the ultimate revenge. The woman, Alistair Vance, erased, just remade the Mike skyline. They plastered her gala photo everywhere, that serene, powerful image in the sapphire velvet gown, a modern monarch in a sea of stunned onlookers. They juxtaposed it with old photos of her standing slightly behind Alistair, her smile gentle and unassuming, the visual narrative of her transformation stark and undeniable. But for Serafina, the news was just background noise, a distant storm she had already weathered. She wasn't at home curled up with a laptop absorbing the praise or gloating over the articles. Vengeance felt like a hollow meal, and she was already hungry for the future. She was at her office, the sprawling, sun-drenched loft that served as the headquarters and heart of Aura Designs. She had been there since 5 a.m., long before the first headlines had even hit the internet. Dressed not in a velvet gown, but in impeccably tailored black trousers and a simple cream silk blouse, she was already in her element. She stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, a simple ceramic mug of black coffee. Warming her hands, looking out over the cityscape, she was about to irrevocably change. The office behind her was already buzzing with a new electric energy. Her team, a tight-knit group of 20 brilliant minds she had handpicked, was moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The Zenith Project, once a confidential dream, was now a public mandate. The air crackled with excitement, ambition, and the thrill of validation. In the lobby, a television was on, and a sharp-suited analyst was speaking animatedly. "What we witnessed last night was more than a corporate shake-up," the analyst said, gesturing emphatically. "It was a masterclass in strategy, executed with the precision of a surgeon. Jonathan Sterling didn't just invest in a new company, he orchestrated the complete immolation of an old one. Alistair Vance built his house on arrogance and public perception, and Serafina Reyes, the woman he foolishly underestimated, just proved that a foundation of substance, vision, and integrity is the only one that lasts." A small, wry smile touched Serafina's lips before she turned away. Miles away, in a penthouse that now felt like a mausoleum, Alistair Vance was living the other side of that news report. The panoramic views of the city were no longer a symbol of his dominion, but a mocking testament to his public disgrace. His phone, once a conduit for fawning calls and lucrative offers, was now a harbinger of doom. It hadn't stopped ringing, each call a fresh nail in his coffin. "The board is invoking the character and fitness clause," Alistair, his lawyer, had screamed through the phone an hour ago. "They want you out by noon. Your credit lines have been frozen," his CFO had informed him in a clipped, deadpan voice. "The margin calls are catastrophic. We're insolvent." He had tried to call Cassandra, a pathetic, reflexive act, only to find his number was blocked. Her social media was already wiped clean of his existence. He was a ghost in a life he had thought he'd built to last forever. He wandered through the vast white marble rooms, the minimalist furniture now feeling hostile and alien. He saw the ghosts of his own hubris everywhere: the plinth, where an expensive sculpture had been repossessed that morning, the empty space in the wine cellar where his most prized vintages used to be. He slumped onto a sterile white sofa, the one Cassandra had insisted on, and stared at his reflection in the dark television screen. He saw a man, utterly broken, a hollow shell in a Tom Ford suit from the night before. The world had crowned him a king, and he had believed it. He had discarded his queen, his partner, his strategist for a bauble, and in doing so had given her the very motivation she needed to build her own far greater kingdom. The analyst on the television was right. His foundation had been nothing but air, and it had taken only one gust of real power to blow it all away. Back at the Aura Designs loft, the atmosphere was one of controlled, joyous chaos. Phones rang incessantly with offers of partnerships, interview requests, and lucrative client proposals. Serafina moved through it all with a preternatural tum, a steady hand on the rudder of a ship that had just caught a gale force wind. The concrete supplier for the Burj Khalifa is on line 3. They want to bid for the foundation, her assistant announced, eyes wide with awe. Get their preliminary numbers, Serafina instructed, and cross-reference them with the new sustainable composites we were testing. I want a full environmental impact report on every material we consider. Her lead engineer, a brilliant young woman named Maya, approached her, holding a tablet displaying a complex rendering. Serafina, we're hitting a potential resonance issue with the spire design at peak wind shear. The simulations are problematic. Serafina took the tablet, her eyes scanning the complex data. For a moment she was completely absorbed, the noise of the office fading away. She saw the problem not as a setback, but as a puzzle. Her mind, the same mind that had once balanced Alistair's portfolios and planned his corporate takeovers, now danced with physics and aesthetics. It's the harmonics, she said, after a moment. We're trying to brute force the dampening. It's inelegant. She sketched a new shape on the screen with her finger. What if we alter the cross-section, make it asymmetrical like a bird's wing? Let it slice the wind instead of fighting it. Run the simulation again with a biomimetic profile. Maya stared at the screen, then at Serafina, her expression one of pure admiration. Of course, that's genius. As Maya hurried away, Serafina's assistant approached again, this time holding a simple, elegant bouquet of white tulips. These just arrived, from the original 5. The original 5 were the first employees she had hired, the ones who had taken a chance on her when Aura Designs was just a concept and a business plan. She took the small card. The message was simple. We always knew. Now the world does too. A genuine warmth spread through her chest, a feeling more profound and satisfying than any headline. This was real. This loyalty. This shared creation. This was the empire that mattered. Her private line buzzed. The display read, J. Sterling. She retreated to the quiet of her personal office and answered. I assume you've seen the papers, Jonathan rumbled, his voice laced with grim satisfaction. I've seen the headlines, Serafina replied, sinking into her chair and gazing out the window. I haven't had time for the details. We're already storyboarding the primary structural concepts for the Zenith Tower. A dry chuckle came down the line. Of course you are. Always looking forward. That's why I backed you. I hope last night provided a satisfactory conclusion to your previous chapter. Serafina paused, her gaze fixed on a distant skyscraper, one Alistair had once pointed to as a symbol of his ambition. She remembered the cold finality in the lawyer's office, the feeling of being erased. She had carried that feeling like a shard of ice in her heart for months. But now it was gone. Last night wasn't about a conclusion, Jonathan. It was about a beginning. She said the truth of it, solidifying as she spoke. It was never really about Alistair. Not the real work, anyway. Maybe at first the anger was the fuel, but the fire. The fire was always my own. The desire to build, to create something meaningful. That's what drove me through the 18-hour days. She could feel Sterling's smile through the phone. A fine distinction. He was merely the catalyst then. The fool who inadvertently freed the genius from the bottle. He sighed, a sound heavy with a rare paternal warmth. He destroyed himself, Jonathan. His vanity, his cruelty, they were structural weaknesses. The market, the world, it just exposed them. I just opened the door. He was the one who walked through it. Indeed, Sterling said. Well, the future is yours, Serafina. Go build it, and send me the revised Spire simulations when you have them. He hung up. Serafina leaned back, the silence of her office a comforting embrace. She thought of the woman she had been, a quiet partner, who had willingly dimmed her own light so that his could shine brighter. She had believed that was love. She realized now that love, real love, doesn't require sacrifice. It requires partnership. It doesn't demand one person shrink, but that both grow. Alistair had never seen her. He had seen a reflection of his own needs, a helpmeet, a manager, a hostess. The moment his needs changed, she became disposable. The greatest irony was that her true self, the brilliant creator and formidable leader, was everything he claimed to admire. He had been blind to the treasure in his own house. Her victory wasn't in his ruin. His ruin was just a sad, inevitable outcome of his own choices. Her victory was in this moment, sitting in this office, surrounded by a team that respected her, with a project in front of her that would challenge every fiber of her being. Her victory was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, a queen in her own castle, built not of stone and steel, but of intelligence, resilience, and an unbreakable will. She stood up and walked back out into the main office. She went to the grand conference table where the blueprints for the Zenith project were laid out like a map to a new world. She picked up a pencil, the familiar weight of it a comfort, and leaned over the plans, her mind already consumed, with load-bearing walls, sustainable energy systems, and the aesthetics of the spire. Her reign was just beginning. And that's the incredible story of Serafina Reyes, a testament to the fact that the most powerful form of revenge is not destruction, but creation. She didn't stoop to her ex-husband's level. She built a new one for herself so high he couldn't even reach it. Her story reminds us that our value is never determined by who leaves us, but by what we choose to build in their absence. It's a powerful lesson in turning pain into power and transforming personal heartbreak into a public triumph, not for the approval of others, but for the fulfillment of our own potential. What did you think of Serafina's epic comeback? Could you feel the tension in that ballroom? Let us know your favorite moment in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of incredible transformations and inspiring vindication. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.
What happens when a man's final cruel prophecy is shattered in the most spectacular way imaginable? For Emma Vance, the final words her celebrity ex-husband, Julian Thorne, ever spoke to her were a curse. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. You will die alone." He said it with the smug certainty of a man who believed he had authored her entire existence. But what Julian didn't count on, what the world couldn't have predicted, was that the universe had a flair for irony. Less than 12 hours later, Emma Vance wouldn't just be fine. She'd be on the front page of every major news outlet, her name a global trending topic, all because of a single candid photograph, her hand held gently, securely in the hand of the world's most enigmatic and untouchable billionaire. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens the morning after your world ends. The air in the penthouse was cold. It wasn't the fault of the climate control, a state-of-the-art system Julian Thorne had often boasted about in interviews for architectural magazines. It was a frigid, soul-deep cold that emanated from the man himself. Julian, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile engineered for talk show sofas, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the sparkling expanse of New York City, as if he owned it. In many ways, he thought he did. "It's all signed Emma," he said, not turning to look at her. His voice, the same one that calmed millions of his followers with platitudes about unlocking your inner power, was now clipped and sharp as a shard of glass. Emma Vance clutched the pen in her hand, her knuckles white. The final divorce paper sat on the vast marble island in the kitchen, a kitchen she had designed from the veining in the stone to the specific shade of brushed brass on the handles. It was a space meant for warmth, for laughter, for the life she thought they were building. Now, it was just a stage for her public execution. "I know, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't slept in days. For 10 years, she had been Mrs. Thorne, the quiet, supportive wife of the self-help magnate Julian Thorne, author of the global bestseller The Architect of You. She had been the one who edited his manuscripts until 3 in the morning, who fact-checked his research, who coached him through his anxieties before every major speech. She had sacrificed her own burgeoning career as an academic, specializing in Renaissance art, to build his empire, believing his success was their success. The cracks had started as hairline fractures. His casual dismissal of her opinions, his gaslighting her memories of events, the way he'd subtly mock her in front of their influential friends. Then came the affairs which he'd explained away as the unfortunate but necessary burdens of a man of his stature. The final break came when she discovered he wasn't just having an affair. He had a long-term partner, a younger, more malleable version of herself already installed in a condo he'd bought downtown. Good. He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with disdain. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to his tailored Zegna suit. She felt like a ghost in her own home. "The movers will be here tomorrow for my remaining effects. Your things? Well, you don't have much, do you? I'll have them put in storage. You have 30 days to collect them." Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her things were mostly books, research papers, and sentimental items from her family, things that held no monetary value to him. "Where am I supposed to go, Julian?" She asked the question, tasting like ash. The penthouse was in his name. The bank accounts had been systematically drained into trusts she couldn't access. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Julian's legal Rottweilers, had managed to secure her a settlement that was, in Julian's world, pocket change. It was enough to live on for a year, maybe 2, if she was frugal. It was an insult disguised as a severance package. He smirked, a cruel twisting of the lips that never reached his televised eyes. "I don't know, Emma. That's your problem now, isn't it? You wanted to be independent. So be independent." He walked over to the island, picking up his pristine leather briefcase. He didn't even glance at her. He was already moving on. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "I will." Her defiance seemed to amuse him. He paused at the door, turning back for one final devastating volley. His face was a mask of mock pity. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice dropping into the intimate conspiratorial tone he used on his podcasts. "You poured everything into me. You have no career, no connections of your own. You're, 36? Past your prime, darling. The world is a brutal place for women like you." He stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating her. He leaned, in his voice a venomous whisper, in her ear. "Let me give you one last piece of free advice, my dear ex-wife. No one will ever want you. You're nothing without me. You carry the stench of failure. Men of quality, men of substance. They want a winner. They don't want someone's discarded leftovers. You will die alone. He pulled back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his curse. It was the final brick in the wall he had built around her heart. And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous empty space. For a long moment, Emma didn't move. She just stood there, his words slithering into the cracks of her broken confidence. No one will ever want you. You will die alone. She finally let out a ragged sob, collapsing against the cold marble. The city lights outside blurred into a cruel, glittering mockery. Julian was right. She had given him her youth, her intellect, her loyalty. And in return, he had taken her name, her home, her future, and left her with nothing but a curse ringing in her ears. In that moment, sitting alone in the ruins of her life, she believed him. The next few weeks were a blur of beige. Beige boxes, beige walls of a tiny third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and a beige, flavorless existence. Emma had found the apartment in a daze. It was all she could afford. The grand views of Central Park were replaced by a view of a brick wall and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. The scent of fresh orchids Julian insisted on was replaced by the smell of damp old wood and her neighbor's cooking. She unpacked the few boxes Julian's men hadn't accidentally misplaced. Her books, her precious companions, filled makeshift shelves. Her research notes on the artist Artemisia Gentileschi, a female painter who had triumphed over immense personal violation and patriarchal oppression, felt like a cruel joke. Emma had once dreamed of writing the definitive book on her. Now she could barely summon the energy to read the titles. Julian's curse echoed in the cramped space. No one will ever want you. It became the soundtrack to her lonely nights. She'd scroll through social media, a masochistic ritual. Julian was thriving. He was photographed with A-list actors giving talks at prestigious conferences, and his new girlfriend, a model named Crystal, was splashed across his Instagram, always laughing, always perfect. He had already rewritten their history, painting himself as the patient husband who had finally freed himself from a negative and uninspiring partner. His followers lapped it up, flooding his comments with praise for his strength and authenticity. Emma's only lifeline was Chloe Davies. Chloe, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal art gallery owner, had been her friend since college. She'd never liked Julian, calling him a self-help vampire who drains the life out of everyone and sells it back to them in a paperback. Chloe showed up one Friday evening, armed with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a container of pad thai. She took one look at the apartment, and Emma's gaunt face and her expression hardened. "Okay, that's it," Chloe declared, setting the food on a wobbly IKEA table. "The moping is officially over. Operation Phoenix begins now." Emma gave a weak smile. "I don't feel much like a mythical bird, Chloe. More like a pigeon with a broken wing." "Nonsense," Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Sancerre. "You are Emma Vance. You can spot a forged Botticelli from 20 paces, and you can recite Vasari's Lives of the Artists backwards. That sociopath didn't give you your brain. He just tried to convince you not to use it. We just need to remind you who you are." Chloe talked for hours, her voice filling the quiet apartment with life. She spoke of new artists, of gallery openings, of the vibrant world that Emma had been cut off from. Slowly, tentatively, Emma found herself correcting a point Chloe made about the use of lapis lazuli in the Scrovegni chapel, the old fire of her intellect flickering faintly. "See, she's still in there," Chloe said. pointing at her with a shrimp-laden fork. Now for the main event. She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy expensive. The calligraphy was elegant. "What's this?" Emma asked. "This," Chloe said with a flourish, "is your re-entry into the world. It's the St. Jude's Foundation Annual Benefit Gala, the biggest art world event of the fall. They're auctioning off a recently discovered Degas sketch. Everyone who is anyone will be there." Emma recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. "Chloe, no, I can't. What would I wear? Who would I talk to? Julian will be there. He's a patron." "First," Chloe said, ticking the points off on her fingers, "I have a friend at Marchesa who owes me a colossal favor. You will be dressed in a gown that will make angels weep. Second, you will talk to me. And third, screw Julian. Seeing you there looking magnificent and not giving a damn about him will be like a stake through his narcissistic heart. It's the perfect revenge." "I don't want revenge, Chloe. I just want to be invisible." "Too bad," Chloe countered. "Invisibility is cancelled. You've spent a decade in the shadows. It's time to stand in the light. Not for him, not for anyone else. For you. Remember the woman who wanted to write the Gentileschi book? The one who was passionate and brilliant? She wouldn't hide from a bully in a bespoke suit. She'd face him." Emma looked at the invitation. The St. Jude's Foundation. The very name felt like a sign. She thought of Julian's parting words, the poison of his curse. "You will die alone." Maybe he was right. Or maybe, just maybe, Chloe was. Maybe the only way to break a curse was to defy it. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of her lungs in months. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "Okay, I'll go." Chloe's smile was triumphant. "That's my girl. Now let's finish this wine. We have a phoenix to raise from the ashes." The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. The air hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations, scented with expensive perfume and ambition. Emma felt a wave of vertigo. For years, she had navigated these events at Julian's side, a silent accessory. Tonight, she was on her own, and it was terrifying. Chloe, true to her word, had worked magic. The Marchesa gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered with every movement. It was elegant, understated, and fit her as if it were spun just for her. Her hair was swept up in a loose romantic chignon, and for the first time in a long time, the woman staring back at her from the reflection in a champagne flute looked not like a victim, but like herself. "Stop hiding behind the ficus," Chloe hissed, pulling her gently by the arm. "You look like a goddess. Own it." They circulated Chloe, greeting people with air kisses and sharp witticisms. Emma managed a few polite smiles, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She kept scanning the crowd for Julian, a primal sense of dread coiling in her stomach. The auction began. The auctioneer, a man with a plummy British accent and a theatrical flair, charmed the room into parting with extraordinary sums of money for art vacations and experiences. Emma found herself genuinely captivated by the art, her professional eye assessing the works, her mind momentarily distracted from her anxiety. The main event was the Degas sketch, a delicate, intimate drawing of a ballerina tying her shoe. Bidding was fierce, paddles shooting up across the room. Emma watched mesmerized when she saw him. Julian. He was sitting at a prominent front table, his arm possessively around Crystal's chair, his paddle held high. He wanted the Degas. Of course he did. It was a trophy. Emma felt a chill and turned away, needing to escape. "I need some air," she murmured to Chloe, slipping away from their table towards a set of French doors that led to a small, secluded terrace. The cool night air was a balm. The terrace was blessedly empty, overlooking a quiet courtyard garden. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes, trying to will away the image of Julian's smug face. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready. "It's a beautiful piece, isn't it, the Degas?" The voice was deep, calm, and startlingly close. Emma's eyes snapped open. A man was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows, looking not at her, but out at the garden. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but he wore it with a kind of casual indifference, as if it were a second skin. "Yes," Emma found herself saying, her voice a little breathless. His use of line, "It's so economical," but it captures the entire weight and strain of the moment. "It's not just a pretty picture." The man turned his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, an air of quiet intensity that was the polar opposite of Julian's performative charisma. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. "Most people just see the ballerina," he said, his gaze now on her. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea. "You see the work." A blush rose on her cheeks. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her, and not the woman standing next to Julian Thorne. I studied art history. It was my field." Was he asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice? She corrected herself, a spark of her old self igniting. "It is my field." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Good." An awkward, yet not uncomfortable silence fell between them. From inside, they could hear the auctioneer's voice rising to a crescendo. "Sold to Mr. Julian Thorne." Emma flinched, the sound of his name a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold returning. The stranger's perceptive eyes missed nothing. "You know him," he stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a wry, bitter laugh. "He's my ex-husband. The divorce was finalized yesterday." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She instantly regretted it. Why was she dumping her baggage on this handsome stranger? But he didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he actually meant for the turmoil, not for the divorce itself. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. "It's fine. I should go back inside." "Wait," he said, taking a step closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with an unexpected energy. "My name is Alistair." He extended his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like a static shock, shot up her arm. "Emma," she replied. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma, who sees the work." He held her hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As she turned to walk back inside, her heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter, he spoke again, his voice soft. "For what it's worth, he didn't deserve that sketch. He only sees the ballerina." Emma walked back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. She didn't see the rest of the auction. She didn't even notice when Chloe returned to the table. She was consumed by the brief, intense connection with the man on the terrace, Alistair. As the gala wound down, Chloe helped her navigate the exit. They were waiting for their car when a flurry of activity erupted near the main entrance. A swarm of paparazzi, who had been waiting for a politician to leave, suddenly turned their lenses towards the doors. Alistair emerged. And suddenly, Emma understood. The flashes were blinding. Shouts of his name echoed in the night. Alistair Sterling. The Alistair Sterling, the reclusive tech billionaire. The prodigy who had made his fortune in sustainable energy and now ran the Sterling Foundation, one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence here was a major event. He seemed unfazed by the chaos, his expression impassive as his security team tried to clear a path. His gaze swept the crowd, and for a heart-stopping moment, his eyes met Emma's. There was a flicker of recognition, a ghost of the smile she'd seen on the terrace. Chloe was gaping. "Oh my God, you were talking to Alistair Sterling, the great white whale of the Forbes list." Before Emma could answer, the crowd surged. A clumsy photographer stumbled backward, bumping into Emma and sending her off balance. She gasped, expecting to fall, but a strong hand shot out and caught her arm, steadying her. Another hand instinctively found hers, lacing their fingers together in a firm, protective grip. It was Alistair. He had broken from his security cordon and was suddenly right there, his body shielding hers from the jostling crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, meant only for her. She could only nod, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the paparazzi, the shouting, it all faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand, the solid presence of him next to her. It lasted only for a few seconds. His security team quickly enveloped them, guiding them towards a waiting black sedan, a car far more imposing than the Uber they had called. He opened the back door, still holding her hand, and looked at her. "Let me give you a ride," he said. It wasn't a request. Dumbly, she nodded again and slid into the plush leather interior. Chloe scrambled in after her, wide-eyed. Alistair followed, and the door shut with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights behind. Emma looked down. Her hand was still linked with his. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, a freelance paparazzo, who had missed the main scrum, lowered his camera. He hadn't gotten a clear shot of Sterling's face, but he'd gotten something else, something intimate and intriguing. A close-up of their hands perfectly intertwined, a story in a single frame. He smiled. This was better than a politician. This was gold. Emma woke up to the sound of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but the digital tempest of her phone vibrating violently on her bedside table. It buzzed and chirped with a relentless, frantic energy she'd never experienced before. Groggily, she reached for it, her mind still fuzzy from the surreal events of the previous night. Alistair's driver had dropped her and Chloe off, a polite and formal goodbye hanging in the air. The feeling of his hand in hers lingered like a phantom limb. She squinted at the screen. 347 new text messages, 98 missed calls, a torrent of notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and news apps she didn't even remember installing. Her blood ran cold. This was the kind of attention Julian received, not her. Her thumb trembled as she swiped to open a text from Chloe. It was a string of incoherent capital letters and a link. "Chloe, Emma. Oh my God, holy Sikh, look at this now." With a deep sense of foreboding, she clicked the link. It took her to the homepage of TMZ. And there it was. The lead story, the photograph. It was an artful shot, tightly framed and undeniable. Two hands. Her hand, recognizable by the delicate silver ring her grandmother had left her, was entwined with a man's larger, stronger hand. The cuff of a tuxedo and a sliver of an impossibly expensive-looking watch were visible. The headline screamed, "Mystery woman reclusive billionaire Alistair Sterling in shockingly public romance. She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She scrambled to open other news sites. Page 6. The Daily Mail, Vanity Fair. It was everywhere. The same photo. The same breathless speculation. Who is Alistair Sterling's secret girlfriend, the handhold seen round the world? Sources say the woman is a stunning brunette who spent the evening at the St. Jude's Gala with the tech mogul. She was the mystery woman, the stunning brunette. It felt like she was reading about a character in a novel, not herself. Then her stomach dropped as she saw the comments section. The digital mob was already at work. Sleuths were trying to identify her. And then someone did. A gossip columnist with a long memory posted a picture of her from 3 years ago standing behind Julian at a book launch. The narrative shifted with whiplash speed. Update: Sterling's mystery woman, identified as Emma Vance, ex-wife of self-help guru Julian Thorne. And that's when the second storm hit. Julian's storm. He hadn't waited. He hadn't stayed silent. He had gone on the offensive with brutal surgical precision. He posted a statement on his Instagram, a platform with 20 million followers. It was a masterclass in manipulation, cloaked in his signature brand of faux vulnerability. The post was a picture of him looking pensively out a window, a cup of tea in his hands. The caption began, "Friends, many of you have been asking me about the recent news. It is with a heavy heart that I must address this. As you know, I have recently gone through a painful and private separation. I have tried to handle this with dignity and grace, wishing only the best for Emma. To see these photos today is deeply concerning." Emma felt sick. Concerned, I have always been a supporter of Emma, even as we grew apart. But I fear she is in a vulnerable place right now. To see her latch onto a man of such immense wealth and power so quickly, literally the day after our divorce was finalized, is alarming. I pray that she is not being taken advantage of, and that this is not a cry for help or a desperate attempt to fill a void. I am worried for her well-being. I will be making no further comment on this matter, as I wish to focus on healing. Please send her your positive energy. It was diabolical. In one fell swoop, he had painted her as a mentally unstable, desperate gold digger. He was the concerned, sensitive ex-husband. She was the pathetic, grasping woman. He had co-opted the language of therapy and wellness, a language she had helped him perfect, and turned it into a weapon against her. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol aimed squarely at her. Wow, she didn't waste any time, did she? Gold digger alert. Poor Julian. He's so classy. She's clearly a mess. I knew there was a reason he left her. She sounds like a parasite. Hope Alistair Sterling sees her for what she is. She's just using him for his money. The curse. You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. He was making it come true, not by magic, but by the brute force of public opinion. He was branding her, defining her for the entire world, before she could even speak a word in her own defense. Her tiny apartment felt like it was closing in on her. The brick wall outside was a prison. She curled into a ball on her bed, the phone lying face down on the floor, still buzzing, still spewing poison. The shame was suffocating. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed her. She had defied his curse for one night, and in return, he had unleashed hell. The tears she had held back for so long finally came not as a gentle rain, but as a racking, hopeless storm. The knocking was soft at first, then more insistent. Emma ignored it, pulling a pillow over her head to block out the world. It was probably a reporter or a process server with a cease and desist letter from Julian's lawyers for besmirching his good name. Emma, it's Chloe. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the fire department and telling them I smell gas and a crazy woman with a vintage toaster. Reluctantly, Emma dragged herself to the door and unbolted it. Chloe swept in her face a mixture of fury and concern. She was holding a large bag from a fancy bakery and the morning papers, which she promptly threw in the trash. "Don't read that garbage," she ordered. "I've already seen it. That man is not a human being. He's a sentient weaponized press release." Chloe took in Emma's tear-streaked face and crumpled form, and her expression softened. "Oh, honey." She enveloped Emma in a hug. "Don't you let him do this to you. Don't you let him win. He already has Chloe," Emma croaked. "Look at what they're saying. The whole world thinks I'm some desperate, grasping social climber. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Of course he did." Chloe said, her voice steely. "This is his playbook. Control the narrative, isolate the target, publicly humiliate. He did it to that journalist who wrote a critical profile of him 2 years ago. Remember? He's a predator." Just then, Emma's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Emma stared at it in terror. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "It could be the pizza I ordered for moral support," Chloe said, trying to lighten the mood. She pressed the button. "Who is it?" A calm, male voice, devoid of static, came through the speaker. "It's Alistair Sterling." "For Emma Vance." Emma and Chloe froze, staring at each other in disbelief. "Alistair Sterling. Here, at her third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn." "Let him in," Chloe hissed, suddenly galvanized. "For God's sake, Emma, buzz him in." In a daze, Emma pressed the button. A few moments later, there was a quiet knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing there. He was dressed not in a tuxedo, but in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket. He looked younger, less intimidating, but the same quiet intensity radiated from him. He was holding a small, unassuming cardboard box. "Miss Vance." "Emma," he said, his gray eyes searching her face. He saw the tear tracks, the fear. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of a kind of grim understanding. "I know this is an intrusion. May I come in?" She could only nod, stepping aside. He walked into her tiny living room, his presence making the space feel both smaller and safer at the same time. He glanced around at the bookshelves, his eyes lingering on the titles. "I came to apologize," he said, turning back to her. "My presence last night and my carelessness brought this circus upon you. I am truly sorry for that." "It's not your fault," Emma said, finding her voice. "It's his. It's my world that has invaded yours," Alistair countered, "and I have some experience with this, which is why I'm here." He placed the box he was carrying on her coffee table. "This is for you." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek silver device. "It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone," he explained. "Untraceable, unhackable. My personal number is the only one programmed into it. Your current phone is a liability. The press can track it. It can be hacked. This is safe." Emma stared at him, bewildered by the practicality and foresight of the gesture. "I also saw his statement." Alistair continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "It was a cowardly and calculated attack. He is attempting to define you before you have a chance to define yourself. I will not allow that to happen." Chloe, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway like it was a tennis match, finally spoke up. "Damn right. But how do we fight back?" He has 20 million followers who think he's the second coming. Alistair met Chloe's gaze, giving her a nod of respect. You don't fight him on his battlefield. You don't sling mud. You render his attacks irrelevant by telling the truth, but on your own terms. He looked back at Emma, his focus entirely on her. He's accused you of being a gold digger. So we show them you have no interest in my money. He's painted you as unstable. So we show them your strength and intelligence. A spark of anger, hot and clean, finally burned through Emma's despair. He built his entire empire on my work. The words hung in the air. Alistair's expression sharpened. What do you mean, his book? Emma said, the story pouring out of her now. The Architect of You. It was supposed to be my book. My dissertation was on the philosophical concept of the self in Renaissance art, how artists and thinkers of the time constructed their public and private personas. It was about authenticity legacy, building a life of substance. I had a manuscript, years of research. Julian, he took it. He read it, simplified it, stripped out all the academic nuance, and repackaged it with pop psychology buzzwords. He stole my soul and sold it as a self-help guide. Chloe looked horrified. Emma, you never told me it was that direct. I was ashamed, Emma admitted. And he convinced me that no one would ever believe me, that it was our project. Alistair was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. He looked from the pain in Emma's face to the bookshelves crammed with her life's passion. Do you have proof? He asked quietly. Drafts, notes, emails. Emma's heart leaped. Yes, they're in storage, old laptops, boxes of notes. I have everything. Alistair's expression was now one of cold, clear purpose. He was no longer just a handsome stranger or a reclusive billionaire. He was an ally, a powerful one. Then, we have a new plan, he said. We are no longer on the defensive. He wrote that he's concerned about you. Let's give him something to be genuinely concerned about. He looked directly at Emma, and for the first time, she saw not just kindness, but a deep, formidable strength that he was offering to share. He tried to take your voice, Emma. I think it's time the world finally heard it. The next week was a whirlwind of covert operations and quiet strategy orchestrated from Alistair Sterling's minimalist Soho office, a place that felt more like a modern art gallery than a corporate headquarters. There were no reporters outside, no paparazzi. Alistair's world was protected by a level of security and discretion that was an art form in itself. His team, a small group of fiercely loyal and terrifyingly competent individuals, retrieved Emma's boxes from storage. They worked with a forensic IT specialist who recovered every draft, every time-stamped note, every email exchange from her old hard drives. They laid it all out on a large conference table, a mountain of evidence that traced the intellectual genesis of the Architect of You directly and unequivocally to Emma. There were her early manuscripts full of complex academic arguments next to Julian's later dumbed-down versions with his handwritten notes in the margins changing her phrasing into marketable sound bites. It was a clear and damning paper trail of intellectual theft. Seeing it all laid out, Emma felt a profound sense of validation, followed by a surge of cold fury. He didn't just steal my words, she said to Alistair, her voice shaking with emotion. He stole my entire thesis on life. And then he used it to lecture the world and me about authenticity. Alistair stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Over the past few days, their alliance had deepened into something more. They'd spent hours talking not just about Julian, but about everything. She learned about his own past with the media, a vicious, untrue story about his family that had made him retreat from public life years ago. He learned about her passion for Artemisia Gentileschi, and he listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she never had with Julian. A quiet, powerful intimacy was growing between them, forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. "He won't get away with it," Alistair said, his voice low and resolute. "Now, we need to choose our moment." The moment presented itself a few days later. An invitation arrived for Julian to be the keynote speaker at the Global Integrity Summit, a Davos-like conference for tech leaders and media personalities. His topic, dripping with irony, was truth and transparency in the digital age. "It's perfect," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. "It's his home turf. He'll feel untouchable. The hubris will be off the charts. He'll have the whole event locked down," Emma countered, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "I can't just walk in and accuse him." "You won't have to," Alistair said. He tapped a few commands into his tablet. A picture of a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut appeared on the screen. "This is Sarah Jenkins. She's moderating his keynote. She's one of the toughest investigative journalists in the business. She owes my foundation a favor for funding her documentary on dark money in politics. More importantly, she hates frauds." The plan was audacious. Sarah Jenkins, armed with a dossier of Emma's evidence, would conduct the Q&A after Julian's speech. She wouldn't ambush him with accusations. She would do it with his own words and with Emma's. The day of the summit, Emma felt sick with nerves. She wasn't at the conference hall. She was with Alistair and Chloe in a secure viewing suite nearby, watching the live feed on a massive screen. She had done her part. She had written a formal, eloquent statement and had given Sarah Jenkins her blessing to use her research, her words, her story. The broadcast began. There was Julian on a massive stage, bathed in a reverent blue light. He was at the peak of his powers, delivering a smooth, charismatic speech about the importance of living an authentic life. He even had the gall to reference his divorce. Recently, he said, his voice thick with false emotion, "I had to make a difficult choice to align my private life with my public values of honesty and growth. It was painful, but living your truth is never easy." Emma felt Alistair's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it tightly. Julian finished his speech to thunderous applause. He sat down beaming as Sarah Jenkins took the seat opposite him. She started with a few softball questions, lulling him into a state of comfortable arrogance. Then she shifted. "Julian, your book, The Architect of You, is built on a very powerful central metaphor of constructing a life. It's incredibly detailed. I was curious about your research process." Julian preened. "It was years of work, deep personal intellectual exploration. It really came from my soul." "Interesting," Sarah said, looking down at her notes. "Because I have here some academic papers from 2012, written by a then Emma Vance, that explore the exact same theme, the construction of persona in the Renaissance. The language is remarkably similar. For instance, you write, 'To be authentic is to be the sole architect of your own reality.' A fascinating turn of phrase. Almost identical to Ms. Vance's 2011 dissertation proposal, which states, 'The Renaissance ideal was to be the sole architect of one's public reality.'" A flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. The audience murmured. Sarah pressed on her voice like ice. "In Chapter 3, you discuss the facade of legacy, Ms. Vance's research uses the exact same term, the facade of legacy, in relation to the Medici family. On page 184, you use an anecdote about Michelangelo. That anecdote is lifted almost verbatim from an email Ms. Vance sent you in 2013, which we have a copy of. Shall I go on? The color drained from Julian's face. He was sputtering, trying to interrupt. This is an ambush. My work with my ex-wife was a collaboration. She was my partner. Was she a collaborator when you registered the copyright solely in your name? Sarah countered, her voice sharp. Was she a collaborator when you pocketed the entirety of the 8-figure advance? We spoke to your publisher. Her name is not mentioned on any contract. In fact, we have a statement from Ms. Vance herself. And then on the giant screen behind the stage, a picture of Emma appeared. Not a paparazzi shot, but a professional, dignified headshot they had taken days before. Beside it, her statement began to scroll. I am not a victim or a gold digger, the statement read. I am a scholar. The core concepts, the research, and the intellectual framework of The Architect of You were my work. I am proud of that work, and I will not allow it to be used to promote a false narrative of authenticity, nor to be used as a weapon to publicly shame me. The truth, as Mr. Thorne is so fond of saying, has a way of coming out. The room was in stunned silence. Julian Thorne, the great guru of truth, was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, live in front of his most important peers. He was being exposed not just as a liar, but as a thief. The cameras zoomed in on his face, no longer smug, but pale and sweating. The architect had been unmasked, revealing nothing but a hollow frame behind the beautiful facade. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in the conference hall was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. On the massive screen, Julian Thorne's face, once a carefully curated mask of enlightened confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unfiltered horror. The camera operator, sensing a historic moment, held the close-up, refusing to cut away. The world watched as the Architect of You was publicly deconstructed beam by rotten beam. He didn't just look guilty, he looked erased. In the quiet viewing suite, the only sound was the sharp intake of Chloe's breath. Emma sat perfectly still, her hand held firmly in Alistair's. She wasn't watching Julian's face. She was watching the words on the screen. Her words, her truth, finally illuminated for all to see. It wasn't a feeling of triumph that washed over her, but one of profound, solemn relief, like a patient taking their first breath after a long and suffocating fever. The noise in her head, the constant echo of Julian's gaslighting, and her own self-doubt had finally ceased. Alistair squeezed her hand gently. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. Quiet, she whispered, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "The storm. I think it's finally over." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect. "No," he said, his grey eyes soft but resolute. "The storm is just beginning for him. For you, this is the dawn." The fallout was a digital tsunami. Before Julian could even be escorted off the stage by stunned event staff, the clip was being sliced, diced, and shared across every platform. Thorne fraud. The Great Pretender and his stand with Emma Vance exploded globally. The initial trickle of outrage became a flood. Celebrities who had once touted his book as their Bible posted hurried statements of condemnation. Brands that had sponsored his podcast issued press releases severing all ties. His publisher, facing a public relations nightmare, released a statement within 3 hours. In light of new information regarding the authorship of The Architect of You, we are immediately suspending all promotion and distribution of the title and will be conducting a full review of our relationship with Mr. Thorne. It was corporate speak for a public execution. Crystal, his model girlfriend, quietly deleted every photo of him from her Instagram feed. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. The machine that had protected and promoted him turned on him with merciless efficiency. The final humiliating image came a week later, a grainy paparazzi photo of Julian unshaven and haggard in a wrinkled tracksuit, frantically putting trash bins out in front of his empty penthouse. The man who had preached about designing one's life looked like he had lost the blueprint to his own. Emma, however, refused to get drawn into the spectacle of his demise. While the world feasted on the schadenfreude she and Alistair were building, her new legal team, a phalanx of New York's sharpest minds funded by Alistair, moved with swift precision. The settlement meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Emma sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as her lawyers laid out the undeniable evidence of intellectual property theft and demanded reparations, not alimony, but a figure representing her share of the book's profits and damages for copyright infringement. Julian's legal team, knowing they were beaten, folded without a fight. With the first transfer of funds, she didn't buy a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Her first act was to sign the charter for the Vance Institute for Historical Studies. Its mission was clear: to fund and promote the work of scholars, particularly women, in fields historically dominated by men. Its first grant was awarded to a young art historian who had discovered compelling evidence that a famous sculpture attributed to a 17th-century master was in fact the work of his uncredited and forgotten sister. Her next meeting was with the acquisitions editor of a prestigious university press. The editor, a woman with kind eyes and a deep respect for academia, didn't just want to publish her original manuscript on Gentileschi. She wanted to publish a new expanded edition. "We also want you to write a new introduction," the editor said, "about your journey, about what it means to reclaim a narrative, your story. It's as important as the history you write about." For the first time, Emma cried. Not tears of sorrow or anger, but of overwhelming gratitude. Throughout it all, Alistair was her silent, steadfast partner. He never overshadowed her, never spoke for her. He simply created a space where she could be heard. Their relationship, born in the glare of a media firestorm, settled into a rhythm that was quiet, private, and deeply authentic. One evening, he came to her small Brooklyn apartment, the apartment she had decided to keep a reminder of, where she had started her new life. He found her covered in flour, attempting to bake bread, her tiny kitchen a chaotic mess. He didn't laugh at the mess. He simply rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, washed his hands, and started helping her knead the dough. "You know," he said, his hands working alongside hers, "my life was very orderly before I met you. Every minute scheduled, every interaction vetted. I'm sorry for disrupting it," she said with a small smile. "Don't be," he replied, stopping to look at her, his eyes serious. "It was orderly, but it was grey. You brought the color back, Emma. You make the noise of the world bearable." A few months later, they stood on the terrace of his penthouse. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The space, unlike Julian's cold, minimalist trophy home, was warm and lived in, filled with books stacked on every surface and art that was challenging and personal. He handed her an advance copy of her book, The Power of Persona Artemisia Gentileschi, and the Forging of a Legacy by Dr. Emma Vance. Her name, her title, her work. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. I used to stand in a place just like this and feel like the smallest person in the world, she confessed, her voice soft. He told me that I was nothing without him, that I would die alone. Alistair wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. He was a fool, he murmured into her hair. A man that insecure could never understand a woman like you. He didn't understand the irony of his own curse. Emma leaned back against his chest, finally understanding. He thought it was an ending, she said, a sense of wonder in her voice. But it was a catalyst. If he hadn't said those things, if he hadn't pushed me out so cruelly, I would never have gone to that gala. I would never have met you. I would never have found the courage to fight for my work. Julian's curse wasn't a prophecy. It was an accidental gift. His attempt to consign her to oblivion was the very thing that had forced her into the light. He had meant to be the architect of her destruction, but instead, he had merely laid the foundation for her magnificent reconstruction. She turned in Alistair's arms, looking up at him. The love she saw in his eyes was not the possessive, conditional affection she had once known, but a deep, quiet partnership built on mutual respect and a shared truth. The city lights below no longer seemed to mock her, but to celebrate with her. It was a new dawn, bright and clear, and infinite with promise. And it was all hers. Emma Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by someone else's opinion, especially the opinion of those who try to diminish us. It's a testament to the fact that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, is often the necessary prelude to a far better one. Her journey from a cursed ex-wife to a celebrated scholar, hand in hand, with a man who saw her for who she truly was, shows us that the most profound comebacks are rooted in reclaiming our own truth and our own voice. Julian's curse was meant to be her prison, but it became the key that unlocked her true potential. If this story of resilience, justice, and unexpected love moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the most incredible real-life dramas. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Let me know in the comments below.